Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast, where sometimes we feel like prose, sometimes we feel like cons. The podcast for emerging writers, by emerging writers. I'm Paddy Boylan, and I'm hosting today. Joining me are my esteemed friends and colleagues, Matan, Elul.
Hi, I am here. I'm a writer. I write, it's a bit of a funny morning for me. I write horror and fantasy, and I'm also an editor, and you can find my stories on the Precipice Fiction website and our anthology and all that stuff. Glad to be here.
Good intro. And Alex Eldridge.
Hey there. Yes, my name is Alex Eldridge. I'm a writer of horror. I also am writing a bit of literary fiction right now, or commercial fiction, you might call it. And previously I've had stuff published in a few different places. Most recently, the fiction edition of the best-selling literary magazine in Australia, The Big Issue. So really happy about that.
Woo! Pinky extended. You're writing literary fiction?
I am a little bit, yeah. You know, I don't know if it's literary.
Nice,
Maybe it's commercial. I'm not really sure how to categorize it, but I'm trying.
I feel like it's a bit vague. I would actually love to read your literary fiction. I think I've said this before. You write such good characters and character situations that I think your writing would really lend itself to lit fic.
Thank you. I'm trying to lean into that. I feel that is one of my strengths, so I am trying to lean on that aspect of my writing.
And I am Paddy Boylan. I am a writing teacher, editor, and technical writer, and I write fiction, but not enough. But hopefully that's changing in October. I'm going to deliberately make some time and finish my book. Finish my book before it finishes me. And today we are talking about it, but it's not a joke. But it's not a joke.
It isn't.
Today,
it isn't a joke.
Today we're talking about writing groups. What are writing groups? How do you get into them? What are the pros? What are the cons? Pun intended. Let's get started. So we all know each other. Everyone beside Alex and I know. I'm going to rephrase this completely because the more
it's
I
complicated.
say, the less, many of us in Precipice Fiction, who are 6 people, know each other through a specific writing group. And now we've kind of made our own subgroup, which is Precipice Fiction. And I think it's safe to say that we've got an awful lot out of both of these writing group experiences, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I thought that was rhetorical. Yeah, totally. Yeah, friends, colleagues, work, heaps of stuff. It's great.
Yeah. So, guys, why don't we jump straight into it? What is a writing group? Let's start at the real basics. Alex, do you want to give what a writing group is to you?
Sure. So a writing group, to me, at its most core level, is a collective of people. It can be 2 people. It can be, I guess, infinite people, although you'd probably want to limit it a little bit, of people who get together and just basically give each other criticism on their work and receive feedback and give feedback and make adjustments to their writing based on that.
Succinct. Matan?
Basically what Alex said, but I'll also say that what is so nice about writers group is if you can find a writer group that share your goals and ambitions of either being published or self-publishing, and basically you're all in this on the same boat and you help each other out. Now, the most obvious way to help is that whenever you meet, whether it's once a month, once a week, you actually read what the other person wrote, which as a writer that is not published, that's a very valuable thing, because otherwise you just got to beg your friends like, hey, I wrote a thing, can you read it? And beyond that, we also support each other. Like if we have difficulties or we need advice, writing competition, agents, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
well said. I'll add to that. I'm living now in New Zealand and I'm not part of this group, but I know someone who is a colleague of mine is part of a writing group where they really just read their stuff. I don't think giving feedback and that kind of support is so much a part of it. A lot of these people are really first-time writers and they just need the confidence of being able to read and know that, I don't know, maybe this other people are willing to listen and they're not going to eye roll during the process. So I guess it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. Certainly, though, we, Precipice Fiction, are very active in the support that we give each other, I think, right, guys?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
And I think you really hit on a really important thing. Until you get some external validation, or it might not be validation, it might be criticism, like well-meaning, hopefully, that what you're doing is, valid. You're kind of writing in this vacuum, and you're writing in a void, and you don't really know if it's going to be good or not. Like we all hear about that writer who's working on their book for their whole life, and then it never gets completed. And that person never really gets a sense of where they kind of stacked in terms of what they were doing. So I think that removing that solipsism of only being a single person is hugely important. And just the aspect of community as well. There's so many things that tie into this, but yeah.
Solipsism, I think, is the right word. It can really be very. I can't think of any specific examples, but I've definitely heard stories about people that they think their writing is one thing, and then they take it to a group, they get all sorts of feedback they didn't expect, and they're like, "Oh, my writing is not that at all. I've just been alone with it too long."
I love that you said they think that their writing is one thing, and you didn't say they think their writing is good or bad, because it's not just that.
A personal experience of yours?
No, in a way, but I think that sometimes it's not even about a matter of good or bad. It's I wanted this to be funny and it came out scary. I need someone to experience that to tell me that. Or I thought this is horrifying and another guy cackled when the guy's head came off. And I'm like, that was not what I was going for. But you need that organic reaction, which you can only get from someone reading the story. So
absolutely. Or my personal experience from reading and as an editor, often you just can't know if something makes sense until other people hear it. So much of my editing time is spent writing I'm not sure what's going on here. This could be clearer. Did this happen before this? I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, that you really need outside perspective for that. All of which where a writing group is indispensable. What do you guys think? Is a writing group essential? Could you see a writer? Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule, but in general, should everyone be trying to be part of a writing group?
I would say yes. I would say everyone should, but that goes back to the question of, well, what is a writing group? And I think it's perfectly valid to regard a writing group as one reader who you get to read your work. And I think that's if you have a spouse or something and you just say hey, can you read through this for me? I do this all the time. My girlfriend does it she's got incredible reading comprehension, so she always gives me really, really good feedback on stuff that I do. And I think that is a perfectly valid source of writing group. Now, personally, the writing group we have here has evolved a little bit beyond just that functionality, and we can talk about where that goes, the longer you're in it. But yeah, I think if you don't have some external sense of where it's going and what you've actually been doing, it's kind of like shouting into the void, I think. And that's not a good feeling for anyone.
No, it's not. Although I think sometimes a writing group, I'm guessing here, but I'm assuming it could be a little bit intimidating for some people that haven't experienced it yet. I'm actually going to get out and put my reading in front of people.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that could be the case? That actually bringing your work to a group of people the first time could be a little bit daunting?
Can I segue into my first writing group ever?
Of course. You can
segue
any direction you want.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, that segue.
Is allowed. Is that a tangent? It's not a tangent. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
My first writing group ever, I was 19, 20. I just decided I'm taking writing seriously, and it was a forum called Writers Cafe.
What is a forum in this context?
It's it's a place where you drop a story and anyone can just jump in and leave comments. Each story is like a thread, and there was this etiquette that if I left a comment on your story, you are expected to jump on my profile, pick a story you like, and leave a comment. So that's kind of how it works. And this organic group of people out of the thousands kind of forms, where it's not officially a writing group, but you can see that the same 7-8 people are kind of crisscrossed.
Yeah.
Into
Sounds like a writing group to me.
Yeah.
And my first few reviews were like, "Oh, that's cute," but and I thought at first I was a little intimidated because I would go into their stories like, "Wow, these guys can actually write," you know. But it was presented in such a civil and cute way that I felt like it was far less intimidating than it could have been. That very same initial feedback, especially coming through a keyboard without the nuance of tone of other things.
Yes.
So that went well.
So I'm very fortunate in the fact that I don't experience a lot of fear in terms of putting my work out there. I'm not sure why that is. I think maybe it's just a personality trait.
I think it's definitely a strength, though. You're always very bold with showing early drafts, and I think it helps you write more.
I think so. I think it's a plus. But a downside of that, and this I'm going to tie this back into the writing stuff, is that I can overestimate some of the ability of it. I think you guys have a tendency to, personally, I think you guys tend to underestimate how good your work is on the first stuff, and I tend to overestimate how it is. Now, if you, that's not a compliment. I just think that's how we're wired. I think having those other people around you, it can, while it can be intimidating to someone, especially if you don't inherently think your work is very good, if it's not something you've kind of learnt and taught yourself yet. I think if you're able to push through that sense of intimidation, which some people naturally feel more than others, it actually gives you a good measuring stick for like objectively how good your work is, at least within a within a bell curve. You know, you can't. It's very hard to say something is objectively good, but if you get multiple perspectives, you can at least have a
Alex,
range. Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt. I just want to ask you a question. Like, what kind of feedback do we even get at a writers group? What kind of things can people say to us? They're not just going to say it's good or it's bad, right?
Yeah. So the nuance of it is important. So, okay, let's say I'm reading through a story of yours, and it's about, I don't know, someone who is going through they're walking through a scary castle or something, and things jump out and stuff. I might go through it, for example, and this is a totally fictional example. I might go through it and I might go, the way you described this, the way you described the shadows and things, I don't really know if it's giving me the sense of like foreboding and fear that I think you're trying to put across. Or on the other hand, I might go like, this is really good. You need to do more of this. I wanted more of this paragraph about how it was there. So it's like feedback can be both positive and negative, and both of those things are really helpful, because positive feedback can still be like, hey, here's how you can improve this, even if they're already saying it's good.
Look, we have a tendency to, we know the whole story in our head. We know why character A did what they did, or why character B said what they said, and our brain tends to fill in the holes. I think there's a famous illusion where they showed people a sentence that had the word "the" twice, and nobody noticed because their brain just auto-corrected it.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know completely what you're talking about.
We do that on the micro level, which is basically, we just proofreading. Someone can see that you've used the word search 3 times in a paragraph and you haven't noticed. And on the macro level is again, like Alex can say, look, you think this is scary, but you didn't really include why it is scary. Like maybe you have it in your head, but it's not on the page.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've experienced that a lot actually. With like, people always tell me my stuff is funny, like it's quite funny, and when I'm writing it, I don't necessarily think that.
What?
Like I'm not like, okay, so I'm not necessarily going for that tone. It's like I'm reading back, I can see like, okay, yeah, I can see how this is amusing. But while I'm writing it, I don't have the sense of like, they're gonna get a chuckle out of this. So there are exceptions to that, obviously, but
wait. Yeah. When you wrote, without spoiling unpublished work, when you wrote that guy, let's call him the Eastern European guy, helping the main character in that one book with the
I think
you were not trying to be funny.
Obviously that some of that stuff was intended to be funny, but there are definitely times like when people have gone through and been like, this is hilarious, and I'm like, really? Like not in the sense that I'm like, oh no, it was meant to be really heartbreaking, but more in the sense of like, oh, I guess I could have played that more for laughs. Yeah, so that's really it's really helpful to find your voice to
Yes.
help like give you the rails by which you are located in, like, say, your market, like.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the time it's almost like tuning the barometer. Like you can get a sense for, like my thoughts about my work in this regard were actually spot on because everyone is saying what I thought. Whereas my thoughts about my work in this regard are way off. I need to recalibrate. Although, as we're talking about this, so there was something from On Writing, the wonderful Stephen King book. That's one reference.
So good.
He talks about, I think, Alex, you were almost alluding to this with having having Liz. I think I can say your girlfriend's name, right? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Liz?
Yeah. No,
with having
that's
Liz
okay.
as your reader because you trust Liz's opinion. And
Yes.
Stephen King was saying he does that with his wife. He
Yes.
really trusts his wife's opinion. He's like, my wife's intelligent. She gets it. So I take my work to her and I write for her. But I could see certainly if you took your work to the wrong person or the wrong people, people who really aren't the quote unquote target market, the advice you could get could actually be not helpful at all. Not only like, this sucks, I don't like it, but like advice given with the best of intentions that's just way off because the people just don't read romance or they just don't get horror. What are you guys' thoughts of that? Have you experienced something like that?
You really hit the nail on the head there with they just don't read the thing that you're giving them to read. It's not their thing. It's not their taste. Kind of trying to put a square into a circle.
Yeah.
I think you have to put a certain amount of weight behind and know how to weight someone's opinion. So if you're just giving out a random beta read to, say, someone who follows you on a social media account or Reddit or a story swap thing or something like that, and you know nothing about this person, you have to, by definition, kind of mitigate how much stock you're putting into what they're saying, because you don't necessarily know if, like you said, they are conversant with the genre. However, they might point out something that's really glaringly obvious that you just didn't pick up. Now, the ideal situation is that you get this from this person, and then you also get it from the person that you really trust, and it's the same thing. And that actually happens a lot. And when that happens, that's a really good sign that you should either continue on doing this, or if they're telling you to change it, you should probably consider changing it. That's kind of the golden ratio when you get someone who's like, I don't know, this is what I thought, and you have no idea about them, and then someone else whose opinion you trust and whose whose understanding of your work to be a high level.
Yeah. And I thought of this because when Matan, you were talking about that internet forum, my first thought was, do I want strangers giving feedback on my work? Because if I don't know what their tastes are, or frankly, how good their judgment is in terms of this stuff, that could lead you in a pretty strange direction.
Totally.
But I want to put this in the context of a writing group, because if you have a writing group and there's 5, 6, let's say 6 people in it, okay? Because
that seems like a good
happens
number.
to be our number.
Yeah.
So
it seems good.
Out of the 5 other people that are reading your story, statistically, probably 1 or even 2 of them are not the right reader for what you're writing. Unless you're in a hyper specific genre group that everybody's just fantasy, then maybe you'll get a 5 out of 5. But in general, I was part of the open genre group in Australia, and we had sometimes up to 12 members, and it was defined as open genre. We had biographies, romance, we had smut, we had fantasy, we had sci-fi. And you're sitting in a room with 10 people that you love and respect, and sometimes someone will say something with the best of intentions, but it's just not the right feedback for you. And sometimes that can snowball, and they can even convince other people in the circle of their feedback because they're very convincing, because they make good arguments. And that can also almost be detrimental to your novel, because you're kind of trapped. On the one hand, you want to be able to accept feedback. You don't want to be stuck in your dogma and be like, I'm a good writer, I know what I'm doing, because that's a sure way to achieve bad writing, by ignoring feedback. but you also like you guys said, you got to put a limited amount of stock in it and try to show it to as many people as you can. And like Alex said, if the person you trust also says that, that's a good sign.
Mm. I like to think of it
say
as a Venn diagram. So let's say you've got your constant reader, to use another Kingism, here. That's that one. Then you have rando from the internet here, okay? And then you have someone in between, who's someone you know and whose taste you know, but who maybe writes in a different genre to you and has a certain bias that you are familiar with and you're going to pick up. If all three of those people are honing in on this one thing, you got a pretty safe bet that that's good criticism. And that won't always happen. It won't even happen very often. But you get a sense of, you sort of begin to get a sense of what is constructive criticism and feedback for you and what you can actually use. And look, to be real talk here, the best criticism you will, on some level, even if it makes you angry, you will resonate with, and you'll go, that's true. You know what? That guy does kind of come across as a dick the whole novel, and then having that turn around at the end there just doesn't really work. So and even if that annoys you, you will have a sense of you might have to come back to it after a while, and be like, no, actually it was good. But I think inherently, if criticism is good, you will resonate with it on some level, at least.
Yeah, I think you're right. And also about what you're saying about having different kinds of people give feedback. I think that's probably important as well. Have a range of people you can go to, even more than one group if possible. I know that's not achievable for everyone. And for a lot of people, maybe even one group is hard to do. But although what we did, and hopefully this is a benefit to people that maybe don't have a writing group or at the start of their journey, like we are. We're sort of advanced beginners, I'm going to say.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, our open genre group was over Zoom. I joined during COVID. I know, Matan, you were there since the days of meeting in person. Is that right?
I was there 3,000 years ago when
exactly.
Pre-stock era.
But me meeting over COVID.
No, it was physical.
Yeah, meeting in person. Zoom meetings are a thing. Zoom groups are a thing, and don't discount them. It's easier than ever to get in touch with a group of people that want to make a writing group. Start your own. If you can't find people, try and start your own. I guess the only caveat to that would be maybe be a little careful about how you let in. Like we were saying, the sorts of opinions you get matter, and the judgment and tastes of the people involved matter. Matan, you look like you have some very...
I'm just smiling because you don't understand how many times we had... You guys know, listeners, maybe you know by now, we had a convener named Jack for the open genre group.
The great Jack.
And you don't know how many... Yeah, Jack is terrific. And Jack used to give me lifts home, right? Because we used to live in the same area. And every time a new member would join the group for like a test meeting, at the first few seconds of the drive, he wouldn't bring it up, and then he would say, so what do you think about the new girl or the new guy? And then I know that this is like the foundational conversation that's going to dictate how we're going to tell them when we're meeting again or not. And
okay.
And Jack would legit tell them, like, you're not part of the group yet, just so you know. You're just like...
he was very strict on that.
He did the same thing to me, which I actually think is a really good idea. Keep that gate. Keep the gate. You can't let everybody in because not everyone's going to be a good fit.
No.
And Mike, let me tell you, there were some horror stories. Like some people walked into that room and you're like, please don't stay. Please don't stay. Please hate us. Please don't ask to stay.
This is getting juicy. I had no idea. I had no idea.
And
Can you remember anything specifically with that?
Yeah.
I got heaps of stories. But the thing is, like, once someone is in, like, once they've brought something to read more than once, you cannot kick them out. You cannot. Maybe some people are capable of that. I am certainly not capable of being that person.
I couldn't do that.
And I remember we were stuck with one person. I'm not going to say names. And wow, she was special. Okay. Like the amount of energy we needed not to have a collective eye roll every time she opened her mouth. Wow. God, that was like, you'll have those. You'll have those, and sometimes they'll be subtle. They'll just be a little bit annoying, or maybe they'll be beautiful people, but they'll just not get it.
Yeah.
And their first reaction when you finish reading will be like, "I don't get it." So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
This
that's the
is-
thing in writing groups. It is a thing.
Yeah.
It's part of the experience, guys. We got lucky. We got
You're very lucky.
what do you call a six? A quintlet? No, that's a five. We got a six
Don't know.
pack of really
Like
nice
a hat
people.
trick. Yeah.
Yeah.
A double hat trick.
Is that a hat trick?
I think a
double
hat
hat,
trick's
that's a
like
double
three. I don't know. I think it might be a double hat.
A double hat.
Yeah, would say
I
it
like
is.
six pack. I like that.
We did get really lucky, and
Yeah.
we work really well together. And we've also released an anthology together. I forget what that's called. What's the name of the anthology?
The new
we did?
mythic. It's the new
Yeah.
mythic out
Something-
now on
some-
Amazon.
That's right, ladies. and
Amazon, was
gentlemen.
that the website? Was
I believe
called
it was.
Yeah, I
Amazon?
believe it
believe
was.
it
We have an
was.
affiliate link.
So
That was
buy
the
that.
one, right? Amazon.com. Right.
Moving along, yeah, but that's really legitimate. Is like if you're going to be making a group or even coming to it, the right people matters, and cultivating the group matters, making sure that the opinions are correct and that the feedback is good, and basically that the people get along. So when is it time to maybe leave a writing group? Let's say you've come to it, and for whatever reason, you're just not getting the best feelings. Maybe you come out of it feeling quite defeated about your writing, which isn't good. Maybe you're coming out of it feeling a little uncomfortable. Maybe the feedback is really on point and really good, but there's something about the people that's not gelling with you. All those are potential scenarios. When might you say, no, this isn't the one for me?
Do you mean initially or like?
Whatever.
Maybe after
Whatever.
years.
Let's
Maybe
keep it
after
open.
Weeks.
All right. I would say you probably want to finish up with a writing group when you feel like you've squeezed all the juice from that lemon. You know, when you feel like, okay, because here's something that does legitimately happen. Okay, when you're in a writing group, even if you're with really really good writers and really good critics, I suppose.
Yeah, critics. I think
people-
that's correct.
Yeah. People will have opinions on your work, and you'll begin to notice patterns. And so you'll almost be able to say what they're going to say about your work before they've even read it, because you know what their biases are. And if those if those things are the only salient points that come up, and you feel like you're just not getting it, if people who are really good critics, like I think everyone in our group is able to consistently find, I mean, sometimes there are repetitions and things, but consistently find reasons why things should be written in a certain way, or criticisms that are unique and original and are helpful. But you might be in a group where you just keep hearing the same, like, this character sounds flat, and you know that's just what they're going to say, because you tend to write characters that are very very internalized,
Distant.
Or understated or something.
Exactly. So that you can just kind of write that off, and that can be pretty annoying to hear someone like constantly criticizing what you think is a fairly legitimate aspect of your work. So I'd say that's one potential reason why you might want to finish up with a writing group, if you feel like you've got everything from it.
I think there's a writer. Her name is Erin M. Evan. She's doing quite well. I listened to a podcast of hers one, and she said that in 20 years she's gone to like 10 writing groups.
Wow.
And she did find the one that she stuck to for years, but she was not shy about saying, no, that's not the right one. No, that's not the right one. There's probably you don't have to go through 10 to find the right one. And let's be honest, maybe only a specific group of people can meet on Wednesday morning, which is exactly the time that you can allocate for that, because you got university and school or your kids. So that's also a part of it. I've had an experience with a group, not our group, that it started off not in the way I liked. There were a lot of things I didn't like about the group. The thing is that I was already invested because I had pretty close relationships with some of them. A part of me wanted to cut it off, but because of the friendship thing, I felt like I couldn't. So I kind of came to terms with the fact that, this is going to be something I'm going to do. Limited stock, don't take it too badly if they don't get your writing. Try to take some good criticism out of it. And at some point, I just
What about it didn't work for you?
There were no time limits per reader.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think we have to respect each other's time. We cannot just go for 55 minutes and then expect everybody to stick around for 5 hours.
Good God, no.
Yeah, that's brutal.
And like, and there was also a thing about, I don't want to go into too many details here, but it wasn't for me. It was for them. They did things the way they liked it. It was great for them. It was very productive for them. But at some point, after realizing that I'm not going to leave, and this is almost like a different advice, I just started saying out loud, like, in a feedback sandwich kind of way, I like this and this, but what if we change that? And gradually, like, I just said, what if we put a timer for 40 minutes? Let's try that. And at first, there was a bit of pushback, and eventually they said, yes, okay. And then I said, what if sometimes we do this on Zoom? Because it's hard, especially if you're going to be sitting here for 4 hours. And there was pushback, but after a while, they also said yes. And I actually quite enjoy this group right now after a year and a half. Because sometimes you can, if you have a good relationship, a friendly relationship, maybe you could try to discuss what bothers you, and maybe it can be salvaged, almost like couple therapy. But the point is, ask yourself, is it better to just cut costs and go to a different group that might already be aligned to what you need?
Yes.
And I think don't be shy. We barely have time. We're working, we're writing, we have things, obligations. Don't waste your time on a group that, even if it's perfect for you in terms of feedback and genre, if you walk out feeling bad, then it's probably not the right group for you.
Yeah.
Yes. Although, like dating, this is probably also dependent on how big the pool is. If you're living in an area, or for whatever reason, you know that it's just going to be really hard to find a writing group, then maybe you do want to do that couples therapy and workshop a little more. if you're pretty confident that you can find like a dozen other writing groups like straight away, then there's not as much incentive. You find the right one for you. Do not take this as dating advice. Just realize that this can be construed as dating and relationship advice. Do not
break up with your writing group.
Yes, this is all.
Don't break up with them in a text message or something like that.
Yeah.
Writing advice. 40 minutes sounds crazy long, though. I wouldn't.
That's a long reading.
I wouldn't
session.
do that.
Yeah,
I think
I would
maybe
have 20, but
even 20 minutes feels very long for me. I think it'd be really helpful actually thinking about it to maybe give what we did in open genre, because I think that was a really successful template.
10 and 10. 10 and 10. Right?
Yeah.
10 reading, 10 feedback.
Okay, that's what it was?
Open genre.
Yep.
Yeah, 10, 10. 20, use it any way you want, but if someone read for 18 minutes, we would like look at them like, oh, that's what you're doing? All right.
Yeah. There was an understanding, yeah.
Yeah, everyone gets 20 minutes. They can use it however they want. And the convention was 10 minutes of reading. They read for 10 minutes, and then everyone gives 10 minutes of feedback.
Yeah.
And Alex, you say it's an understanding, I think in part, but also Jack, who ran the thing, was a really good administrator, and he would cut you off. And at 10 minutes, he would say, he would interrupt you and say, do you want to keep reading? Because you're reading into your feedback time now, and you only get 20 minutes.
I loved it.
Yeah. And once 20 minutes came, he was very on point about like, that's 20 minutes. Nope, we're up. Nope, we're going to move on.
He'd cut you off. He would definitely cut you off.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I think most of the time when I did it, it would be, I'd do the 10, or maybe go a little bit over.
Yeah.
And then I'd usually I don't think, look, I might be misremembering this, but I don't think I usually went over the time. You think like feedback was usually about 5 minutes, so maybe 7.
Don't remember.
No,
you don't think?
No, not at all. But you know what I felt? There were moments like before we had the flood of sci-fi fantasy nerds coming in.
Yeah,
when it was just like me and you, and Alex would read this amazing like sci-fi, cars flying around, and it would finish reading, and I would feel I'd have like stars in my eyes, and I'm saying, "Oh my god, Alex, that was so good!" And everybody else like, was it?
They'd be like, I didn't really get the laser gun thing. What was that? Like, what was a bunch of terms I'd use, and they just would be like,
why did you make the sound when he turned on the light thing?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Know your people. Have the right people, right? It comes back to that.
Group,
yeah.
Yeah, and in fairness, they did sort of grow to appreciate what I was doing. I think in the end they were like, yeah, okay, we get it, we understand where you're coming from.
Maybe you were schooling them on the conventions of sci-fi at the same time.
Yeah, I did actually go to one other writers group before I joined that one, which was basically the genesis of Precipice Fiction. I remember it was like it was an open genre one, but it was fantasy, and with I think there were maybe 5 people there, and I can't even remember what the name of it was. So, I'm not going to be naming names, but I just remember, with the exception of one writer who I think was new as well. Actually, I just didn't think it was that great, and I was like, if I don't really like, if I'm not getting a lot out of these guys as authors,
Yes.
How valuable is their criticism going to be to me? And I think that's don't take criticism from people who, you don't respect the value of their work. And that's a pretty harsh thing to say, but
it's true. It's true. We're not going to like everything.
Yeah.
In fact, not naming names, I can think of one person in open genre whose work I didn't really care for.
Yeah.
And it actually affected my enjoyment of the night. Because if you're going to be giving so much of your time with this is listening to people read, and that can be good, right? But also,
Paddy,
it's a lot of time to give if you're just not going to enjoy what's being read. Yes.
Now imagine that person is reading for 40 minutes.
I did.
I know who you're talking about, actually, I think.
I just would never come back.
Go double. That's No. Okay.
It's a brutal trial.
You know what's the irony, though? Sometimes these people, like the one person that I discussed without giving names, that was really difficult. That person's a published writer doing quite well.
Yeah. Wow.
In their genre, which is very far from our genre.
Yeah.
And I remember when I published I sold a story. I sold a short story, Our House, to Dimension 6 magazine, a horror story. And I read it first in the group and everybody loved it. And that person's reaction was like, oh, I guess everything can sell.
Shit.
And I was just like, thanks. Yeah.
That's an awful thing to say.
Yeah, that's pretty, And I would like to say, like, in the vast majority of interactions I've had in writing groups, people are not dicks. Like, generally,
no.
because there's this understanding. It's like what's the principle of, like, not harming someone because they're
the golden rule?
Yeah, I guess it is the golden rule. Like, people are not going to be rude about your stuff because they know that you will be rude about their stuff, So no one, like, the vast majority of instances I've found, people have been very understanding, reciprocal. Even if they don't like something, they'll be like, I liked this about it. This wasn't really to my taste. And,
yes,
that can be hard to hear, but it's usually framed in a way that's pretty okay, like, at least that's how I found about it.
No, I agree. And I think maybe also being writers, we're in kind of a self-selecting community where I would say maybe a little more empathic than Betty, maybe able to give criticism a little more. And we know what it's like to receive unhelpful criticism and how much that can set us back and sometimes hurt us and our sense of a writers. Just before we move on, I want to give one more example of another thing that I think it's not necessary for writers group, but it was a good idea in the open genre group. Jacques used a randomizer. He used like an online randomizer tool. He put everyone's names into it.
Yeah, the wheel was great.
The great wheel.
That was my wheel.
That was you?
That was Matan's
wheel.
I brought up the wheel.
Yeah. It worked very well. It randomized who was going to speak every week, and law of averages typically, except you, Matan, who I remember was conspicuously excluded by the wheel. Maybe actually this is not a good reason to use a randomizer now that I say it.
I remember.
It's an idea, though. You can use a randomizer, and then if someone just gets screwed, you just throw them a bone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that kind of...
Actually, I think that was a big component to it. It sounds very technical, but I think you're really right, because if it's always going to be Jeremy, and then it's always going to be Christy, and then and there's this you're just
kind of exciting.
Yeah, you might just kind of like phase out, but if it every time it might be your turn, you're like, and every time after that, so it keeps you engaged. It's a little thing, but I think it was very helpful.
Yeah, it is.
But we also had these cute moments, like when there's only 20 minutes left for the meeting and 2 people need to write, and no, you write. No, you read. No, you will read this time. And it's like
Yeah.
this, this race
After
to.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite sweet
Yeah.
when that would
It's
happen.
endearing. So, guys, we've talked about what we think makes a good writing group, but just as important about getting something from a writing group is giving, especially if you want to be invited back again and just not hear from them back again, like Jack's trick. Can you give each what you think the biggest thing that you think you should contribute if you're going to be a member of a writing group is? What is the thing that you think would make you an ideal member?
I think for me, I think that if you have kids and your kid brought you something they made, even if it's like a doodle, a painting or something, you would think about them going ahead and putting their creativity down and coming to show you. Now, writers are not little kids, but still, in a way, I think take a little bit of that and treat them with a little bit of delicateness.
Yes.
Still give feedback, give constructive feedback. How to do that? Literally, I would say when they finish reading their piece, even if you're going to be the first person talking, give it 10, 15 seconds. Think about it. Let the moment breathe. Think about the best way to say what you want to say. Feedback sandwich goes without saying. But also remember that constructive criticism is so important, but also present it in a way that leaves them feeling good about it. I'm not saying gaslight them into thinking their writing is something it isn't. That's not helpful. But there are ways to present even the most scathing of criticisms in a way that makes the other person feels respected. It doesn't hurt their dignity as a writer in the group. You got to remember, there are people listening. It's not a one-on-one conversation most of the time. Keep that also in mind. And that's it. Just try to wrap it up in a nice wrapping.
Well said. Alex, what about you?
I'm trying to think. I was going to say feedback sandwich. Let me.
Yeah, Matan, that was very succinct.
That was very good. Yeah. It was you really covered a lot there. I would say, as a member of a writing group, I'm really struggling to think of something actually.
I don't know.
Just look, yeah. I mean, like all I could really say is just don't be a jerk. You just think of the golden rule. That's a good way to go about it.
Yeah.
Like just. Remember, people are going to read things out. Some of it you're not going to like. Some of it you're going to find really boring. Like, honestly, just through law of averages, and that's fine. But remember, just think of all the time that, it's taken you to write something and how difficult it was. And if you're one of those people who finds it difficult to bring something to a group, think about that and how that might be for someone else as well. Just empathy, I think, is the big thing there. Just empathize with how the other person must be feeling after having revealed something which could be quite intimate to them. Like writing is pretty intimate in a sense, even though we're theoretically writing for millions of people to read it. Like it's this weird thing. But before it gets to that point where you're really happy with, like, a first draft is it's a baby bird.
Abomination.
It's really, if you say something bad about something, this still happens to me. If like you show it to someone and they're like, yeah, I didn't really like it. Like I might just bin that. Well, I wouldn't actually bin it, but I would maybe not work on it. I might put it into a little file and just never look at it again. So bear that in mind.
The shame cabinet.
The shame. What do they call the trunk like novel or something?
Yeah. Although I think a lot of things are better than we think it is, and everything has good ideas that can be salvaged, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Yeah.
Mine would be probably like respect the etiquette of the group. If your group does things a certain way, if they like prompt responses over email, if they like people to, I don't know, never interrupt, or just whatever the rules are, respect that and try and contribute to that. It's hard to establish the ongoing culture of a group. And often it takes a pretty, I'm going to say, brave sort of person to make that happen. Like Jack often didn't give two fucks, which what made him be a good administrator of the group.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to say, like, you need to stop talking now. Your time is up.
Yeah.
Respect that. Respect the rules of the group.
Yeah.
And maybe the other thing is respect other people's time. Yes, it's about you reading and having people give feedback to yours, but it doesn't work if everyone doesn't contribute. You're also there to listen to other people's work and to give feedback. So maybe even if you don't have something to read that week, think about still coming anyway. It shows a good willingness to participate, and it's a giving. And that's kind of what it's about. It's a very give take. It's not just a take.
Just a real quick plus 10 plus a million to what Paddy just said. It's really annoying when someone only comes once a month and they only come when they have something to read. If you come every week, you can read every week. But if you come once in a while, you can't expect to always be reading and not come when it's time to give feedback for other people. So definitely support what Paddy just said.
Yeah. Just one thing before we sort of go into the wrap up mode. One other thing I would like to say is that, like, remember, like, when you're criticizing, when you're reading through other people's work, that's not entirely a charitable thing. You are learning a lot from other people's stuff. Like,
yes,
it'll blow your mind how much you did not know about writing before you started going through and thinking about other people's work. That I can't believe I didn't bring that up before, because that is almost the most valuable part of a writing.
I'm thinking the same thing, actually. Like, we really should have touched on that earlier, but you're 100% right. Yeah.
Just like you'll learn so much about craft and prose and genre tropes and conventions. Something that you thought was really original might be like a real hacky cliche, but you just didn't know because you weren't familiar enough with the genre, for example. So yeah, I think that's a really, really important thing as well.
Well said. Very well said. Matan, do you want to close this bad boy out with a quote?
Sure, I'll read the quote that we have gotten, because we always get a quote, and we have one. And the quote is in my hands. Sorry. Okay, and the Oscar. The quote is: "Criticism, like rain, should be gentle enough to nourish a man's growth without destroying his roots." By Frank A. Clark.
Wonderful.
That's a spicy quotable.
That is the spiciest of quotables. And this has been our spicy podcast, ladies and gentlemen. If you've enjoyed this, please consider leaving a review. Please consider leaving a rating if your app allows it. And if it doesn't, change to an app that does. Just ditch your app, go to one, give us 5 stars. Look, give us anything you want, but any feedback at all you can offer would be really helpful, both for the algorithm and for our own personal growth. And also, if you're interested in reading what we have done collectively, we are Precipice Fiction, and we've written The New Mythic, which is an anthology of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, available now on Amazon, and it's a cracker. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Paddy, Alex, and Matan. We hope you've learned something today. I know I have personally, and we will see you again next week for more shiny nuggets of writing wisdom. We'll see you then.
You're listening to Prose Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.